But I will tell you, this is the first time, Jen, that I have felt like the 2024 election is in great trouble for the president and for our Democratic control, which is essential to moving forward.
The 2024 Republican presidential primary field is taking shape.
The battle lines are becoming clearer, and so is the field of candidates.
Is the odds-on favorites, if you look at the polling, still Trump versus Biden?
That seems to be it, but it's just way too early to tell.
I'm more angry now, and I'm more committed now than I ever was.
Big challenge for these candidates is going to be how do they navigate Donald Trump? And how do they navigate Ron DeSantis?
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny.
Welcome back to the Ruthless Friday program. A very big show and a very big week. An historic week here for the Ruthless Friday program. And it feels like things are changing politically. Like everything is sort of coming into focus. People are revving it up. We obviously have some big elections coming up today, which we'll tell you about in a minute. But we had a whole bunch of polls coming out of the weekend. Democrats are starting to be nervous. That was Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, who was expressing the obvious concern that I would imagine most Democrats would have after they've seen their standard bearer, the incumbent president of the United States, trailing Donald Trump in virtually every single state, according to the New York Times poll that came out over the weekend. So there's a lot to discuss, But first of all, fellas, everybody have a nice weekend?
Yes.
Terrific.
We get some, this guy, all I know is that he kept sending me updates on all of his sports bet winnings.
Well, yeah, obviously the Colts won, and
well, you got to lead with that.
I'm happy for that. But, when I'm going to get like so much coverage of how the Vikings are going to play and, how the Bengals are going to play, and thankfully the
Broncos don't play.
Yeah, the Broncos were on a bye.
Parlay
that was key to the Ruthless Parlay.
Yeah, the Ruthless Parlay hit, which was fantastic. All of our teams won. Everybody's thrilled and happy. And old man Duncan, I really shot the moon on the whole thing.
You had some amazing wagers that you laid down.
Yeah, and some exotic parlays,
I'd like dinner
you hit on
you
some
in
of
Miami.
No.
You hit on some of the exotics, the wild bets?
Yeah, I had Josh Allen rushing touchdown, Josh Allen interception, Bengals over 20.5 points.
Wow.
And that's why, and because the Bengals were over 20.5 points, I'd like to revisit Josh's great suggestion that dinner is on you in Miami.
No.
You just refused.
What were the odds on that exotic? Because that is...
I think it was like 600. Plus
it was pretty good. It was pretty good.
That's a good one.
He had a lot of good stuff. But of course, what's any football discussion without talking about Josh Dobbs and the Minnesota Vikings?
I was thrilled by it.
I'm sure you were, because you bet.
I did.
You stole some of my thunder.
I just aligned our incentives, and I knew me profiting from it would be a little sour taste in your mouth. And at the end of the day, it's all about goofing on your friends.
This is like when you drafted Kirk Cousins, because you knew if you beat me in fantasy football with Kirk Cousins that it would take a little sheen off my penny.
Yes.
Just like that.
Well, it also, this happened like a month ago when we were all watching football at your house. But, you were emotional about the Vikings game. And, you had invited us all over. And it was going to be a tough time to do it because my wife wasn't at home and I was going to have to, haul both the kids over. But I was playing you in fantasy that week. And I was like, boy, oh boy, do I want to be there when I get to beat you with your own player in fantasy that week.
That was not lost on me.
Yeah, it was great.
That was not lost on me. But, look, we all survived and advanced and nothing but Super Bowl bound, even for your Indianapolis Colts, I imagine, under the
no, I have no
quarterback stylings of Minshew.
Gardner Minshew.
Yeah.
It looks like Gardner Minshew. But, yeah, I don't have a lot of hopes. I have no hope. And so I don't really care.
Millions of Americans earn and use credit card rewards. A few big box retailers want to take those rewards away, rewards we use on groceries and school supplies. The cash back to save on gas and grow our small businesses. And travel miles we use to make memories. The so-called Credit Card Competition Act would eliminate credit card rewards. No more travel miles, no more cash back. When lawmakers help mega retailers line their pockets, we pay for it. Tell your lawmaker to vote no on the big box bill. Visit handsoffmyrewards.com to take action today.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, we have a very big show. Our guest today, okay, you're going to want to stick around for this.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have Senator Kennedy in the House. in-house, in person. You recall last time he was on the show, he was via remote. He was extremely hilarious in that, but when there's a little something special added.
Could be our best interview.
I mean, it is just so funny.
Well, the whole thing starts with a goof on me,
which we all appreciate.
Which means he fits right in on the variety program.
He does. And I told him anytime he just wants to talk shit about anybody, just come on in.
Yeah.
Come on in. Open chair.
I mean, next time he comes in, I'm going to be prepared on the other side.
Well, that's what you've said. I don't know that you can be totally prepared. I've seen what he does to people in the Judiciary Committee, and I'm not sure that you want to take that battle. But you know what? I'm here for it.
I'm good at various lawyerings.
I'm here for it. So a reminder. We are going down to the Miami debate, and we're leaving here this very day, where we will be headed down to host another pregame for the Miami debate. And I'm pretty excited about it. I think everything that we did in Milwaukee was just awesome. The fact that it was 114 degrees took a little bit of the energy off of my personal self, but I thought, like, in terms of production value, fantastic, and they invited us back, so we're doing it again, and I think we've got a perfect show lined up down there.
Yeah, I mean, the setup, I'm not going to spoil it. I mean, it's incredible. It's just a phenomenal setup. All the folks who are going to be there, I mean, you're in for one hell of a show.
Yeah.
And again, it's the best deal in this country. It's like the Costco hot dog of events.
Yeah.
$10.
Can you still get tickets?
I think.
Nick, can you still get tickets, or is it cut off?
I think we may have opened up some more.
I think
okay, so
he gave us a cautious thumbs up.
He gave us like one of those had all the confidence of a quarterback coach in the Vikings.
Yeah.
It's like, I hope it works.
I don't know.
But if you want that, you can go right to the main domain.
You know, we might even just take $10 at the door. Who knows?
Who knows? RuthlessPodcast.com for the Miami tickets. If you're anywhere in the area, you're not going to want to miss that at all. Remember, that includes a happy hour the night before, which is going to be incredible. Tickets to the live show and a debate watch party.
Yeah.
As well. So all of that. And the happy hour is on the 7th. Debate, obviously, on the 8th. So
it's going to be a blast.
There it is.
Great.
And you can probably watch it on the YouTube if you're, if you can't come.
Yeah.
You can probably watch it at our YouTube channel, which you should subscribe to.
Yes.
Okay. So let's get into there's major stuff happening this very day. And if you are lucky enough to be in the great commonwealths and or states of Virginia, Kentucky, and Mississippi, you've really got something to work on, because if you haven't voted already, you've got to get out and do it. These are vitally important elections. We've covered all of them. You remember we went down to Austin at the RGA and talked a lot about the Mississippi governor's race, which appears to me to be going in the right direction. This is Tate Reeves, the incumbent governor. He's done a great job down there. There was a lot of talk by Democrats that they thought they were going to be able to shoot the moon on that. Seems less likely, at least at this stage. But you got to put this thing out of doubt. He's got to win that race. Virginia, we've talked a lot about what Governor Youngkin has been doing, and I think one of the reasons why he's been so, shall we say, receptive to people talking about him running for president is because he's been traveling around the country raising money for this very
exactly.
And people who love him want him to run for president, but also want him to succeed. And so he's using all that energy to try to fund these races. And I think it's for the first time, at least in my memory, maybe this has happened years ago, but in my memory, where you've had a Virginia Republican Party funded at around parity for where Democrats are in these state legislative races. Boy, oh boy, if that guy wins in Virginia with all what's going on nationally, that really is a message sender, isn't it, fellas?
Huge. I mean, so his favorability ratings in that state are like terrific. It's probably one of the best governors in the country, if not the best. And Democrats are terrified. So this election is essentially going to dictate control of the legislature.
Yeah. And they can make real changes if they win this thing.
And the only thing that's been standing in the way of Youngkin going full blast has been Democrats are controlling the legislature. And that's why the Democrats are fighting so hard for this. And I remember when, I guess, early voting or voting by mail had begun, I, of course, will retweet out any Youngkin, any one of those folks in Virginia about, like, get out there, go vote. And a lot of minions were like, hey, what the hell's, with this of, like, such early voting or whatever? Well, folks, that's why you got to take the legislature.
Yeah.
You know, the thing is that Youngkin's had this much tremendous success with one hand tied behind his back.
Yeah, playing by their set of rules.
And, I mean, if we can take the legislature, I cannot tell you what a big deal that is. Parents in Virginia are already over the moon with what Youngkin's been able to accomplish, and that's, again, with one hand tied behind his back.
We had David Rexroad on the show just a couple of months ago, and he walked through all of the races in the House and the Senate, and it seems like there's more optimism about the House than the Senate, but lately there seems to be a little bit of optimism about the Senate, too. So you never know what's going to happen. That's why you got to get out and vote so that we can be out there en masse and beat the Democrats.
When we say, like, it's going to be close and this is a big election, I mean, really, really close. It could come down to a single seat in the state Senate.
Yeah, and they're fighting on Democratic territory, too.
Right.
You got to outperform not only the averages, but like
it's an uphill
historical average.
Yeah, it's a uphill battle, and a lot of these like close battleground state Senate and state House districts are in places that Democrats perform pretty well in 2022. But, you know, Youngkin did better in those places, and with him, you know, organizing all this stuff with early vote and everything, you know, I like our odds, but it is going to be very, very close. So if you are listening to this and you are in Virginia and you haven't voted yet, get out there. Every vote really is going to matter in this.
Totally counts, and obviously it helps a little bit when you're running against amateur porn stars.
Yeah.
Just as we found out in the last couple of months. What a nifty little segment that was a few months ago.
Wild. They are. A lot of them are in Democrat strongholds, but wouldn't you know, these Democrat strongholds are the same places where schools are falling apart, where fentanyl is running wild in communities, where crime is on the rise. Call me crazy, but I think Democrats might have something to do with that.
Yeah, no kidding.
You can change it by voting today.
The last one is a very big one, and I think, look, it's personal to us because we obviously know Daniel Cameron, the Republican nominee, current Attorney General of Kentucky, and he's running against Andy Beshear, the sitting incumbent Democratic governor. Now, typically you look at that and you're like, oh, red state. I kind of can't imagine why it was that we wouldn't be able to win that. Republicans have had very, very difficult time winning the governor's mansion in Kentucky. In fact, only Matt Bevin, I think, and Ernie Fletcher in 2008, kind of the only two going back decades. So it's a very difficult state in terms of state elections. Federal elections tend to break more Republican. Included in that is Andy Beshear, son of former Governor Steve Beshear, sort of a political scion of the left in Kentucky. He's got great name ID, and he's been fortunate enough to have an image that sort of transcends his policy, right? So it's like he's there vetoing bills that would ban, like kindergarten sex changes, and somehow it doesn't wear the same way on him.
Yeah, because he has a good press conference on a natural disaster or has a good press conference around COVID. His unfave. The guy kind of walked on water there for a while after COVID. And like he said, like his daddy was governor.
Yeah.
And for a lot of those...
And it's also a weak governorship in that the state legislature can override a simple majority. So all the things that he was vetoing ultimately got done.
Yeah.
Right? So the great angst that you would have about something just not becoming law, you don't have because it did become law just over the objections of the psycho who's vetoing it in the first place.
But because there's so many of those blue dog Democrats who are registered locally as Democrats so that they can vote in the sheriff's election, right, where a Republican might not be running because their daddy and their daddy's daddy was a Democrat, but they're conservative people. These are folks who are socially conservative. Yep. Because that exists, talking about like the 5th district there in Kentucky, it makes it hard also to sort of get a good sense in the polling of what the electorate is going to look like.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of folks who look at these polls and stuff, and we know because we've worked in Kentucky for a long time, it breaks late and it breaks fast.
Really late. And it's one of the only states that I know of where people really, at least on the Republican side, have a much different time frame of putting their jerseys on than the Democratic side. Like, it seems like the Democrats put their jerseys on a year ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And you always see this sort of max Democratic vote where it is for a year plus. And the Republican stuff doesn't really come to fruition until after Labor Day, but more likely than not, it really doesn't come until like the second or third week of October. So you saw all of these polls a month ago that showed Daniel Cameron trailing 8, 10, 12 points. That the last poll that came out, was it Emerson?
Yeah, last Friday.
Last Friday showed a dead heat 47 apiece.
Yeah.
And that's not uncommon. It's a trend line you'll love to see.
You love to see it because it's not just the 5th. It's also like Boone, Canton County, and some of these places like in the Cincinnati DMA that are like good Republican areas. But like you said, it's like they don't put the jersey on till the last minute.
Not until late.
I'll tell you another thing about this race that's really stood out to me is that Democrats have been super bullish publicly and privately in conversations with reporters for an entire year. They've been bragging about how great they're going to do, so cocky. So if Democrats do not win, it is a big disappointment to them. And don't listen to them if they say, oh, it's Kentucky. Of course, Republicans going to win Kentucky. Do not listen to them. They have expected to win since last year at this time. And if they don't, it is a big, big disappointment.
And I think it's, again, critical to reiterate the fact that Bashir, his entire thing is it's a masquerade. He acts like he's a moderate, but his actual policies that he's championed and the people who stand with him, I think, is what's more telling.
I totally agree.
He tries to act like he's a moderate. This guy's like a darling to the left nationally. BLM backs him big time in Kentucky, right? And like you just said, he was completely okay with like toddlers getting gender reassignment surgeries. But he doesn't want like the public and the voters to recognize him.
This is the guy. This is the guy taking pictures with the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. The anti-Catholic transgender group that is so radical they got banned from that MLB game out by the LA Dodgers.
If the LA Dodgers are to the right of you, you've got a real issue going on.
Right.
But part of the masquerade is he's thought he can get away with it because his approval rating stays where it is.
His daddy was governor.
Like his daddy was governor, but also they're preserving his right to be on a ticket someday. And he knows that to win a Democratic nomination, he's going to have to be the left of the left in order to do that. And so they've tried to preserve this. He doesn't break with Biden. He doesn't break with him. Right. You know, like typically a Democrat in Kentucky will say, like, I disagree with the president on X, Y, and Z. Not Andy Bashir. He does not do that. He just doesn't talk about it. He talks about something else and things that also don't exist. But to do that, they think, and you talk to a lot of smart Democrats, they say if he wins this in a state like Kentucky, this is a guy in 2028 or beyond you're going to see on a Democratic ticket, going to be a frontline sort of leader within the party. Now, we can end all that today. Can end all that today and replace him with somebody who I believe personally and Daniel Cameron can be a leader within the Republican Party for decades to come. This guy's not only just a pure talent, which he is, he's a genuinely good man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He is a good human being.
He's got integrity. I mean, like, literally, mobs have tried to come after him because he stands on the side of like law and order.
Yeah.
And I mean, it would be a huge thing for the folks of Kentucky to make sure he wins.
And isn't it hilarious how every single time you have a black Republican candidate, that the most vile racist shit that you could ever conjure up in your head comes out of the left-wing groups?
Yeah, they were running on urban radio calling him like an Uncle Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah.
Well, it's the left-wing radical. It's the BLM. Mm-hmm. It's like when I was looking at my feed and there's like, what are they, Democrat Socialists of America who are like, we like Bashir. I was like, how the hell is this possible in Kentucky?
Yeah.
That like the Socialist Party's like, this is our guy.
They're like, we got it.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, yeah, okay. No, but he seems so moderate. He speaks so nice. They don't, listen, Kentucky, do the right thing here.
Yeah.
Figure this out.
It's going to be, I mean, another one, just to reiterate for our listeners, if you're in Kentucky, it will be close. It's going to be close.
Very close.
If you have not voted yet, get out there today. Vote.
Get out there and vote.
For Daniel Cameron.
It looks like all of the early voting and absentee stuff is on par with a midterm, which is good news for Republicans. Feels like that's headed in the right direction, but you cannot take anything for granted. Speaking of not taking anything for granted, before we get into this first story, is it just me or is it hotter than Hades in here?
Yeah.
It's very hot. Lee has new lights, and the lights have brought a record heat.
I mean, we better look absolutely terrific because I'm not sure it's worth it.
It looks pretty good.
I mean, it's hot.
Yeah.
Look you're just fine.
Yeah. I mean, I'm at my most comfortable.
You know, Smug
Did you do this because we had a senator in?
No, I got to go to the House and help elect Mike Collins, vice chair of the House Conference for Republicans. Everyone, if you're seeing this, call your member of Congress and say, we need Mike Collins as vice chair. Enough is enough.
You know you don't need a suit in the House.
Well, I'm respectful of individuals, you know?
But in the House, it kind of...
Well, honestly, if a conservative shows up not wearing a suit, God knows what happens to them in that building, you know? End up in a gulag.
You're the POC, though.
I'm the POC.
I'm responsible for these gentlemen. Little inside joke for the audience that has maybe seen a live show or two. All right, so all of that being said, I'll focus my mind, even though my temperature is far above 98.6. The polls that came out.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing anybody was discussing over the weekend and Monday in politics, because Trump leads in 5 critical states as voters blast Biden, a New York Times Siena poll finds. According to the New York Times, voters in battleground states said they trusted Donald J. Trump over President Biden on the economy, foreign policy, immigration, as Mr. Biden's multiracial base shows signs of fraying. So here's the first part is the good news. If you look at Nevada, a state that Biden won pretty handily, they've got Trump up 11. I mean, I can't even believe that. Michigan, they got him up 5. Georgia, they had him up 6. Pennsylvania, they had him up 4. Arizona, they had him up 5. And Wisconsin is barely trailing Biden by 2. So you look at all that, and if you're sort of the layman voter who just kind of reads the stories and follows along with the way that the press covers their own polling, it would seem to you like, well, this thing is a wrap, right?
Yeah.
Like, we are in great shape. It may be sort of overstating this in several different ways. It's obviously good news for Republicans that Biden, no matter how you cut it, is in a tremendously bad position for re-election. You guys agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, the top lines look fantastic.
Yeah.
I would say buried in here is some difficult news for Republican primary voters to reconcile.
Yep.
One of the things that and I feel like I'm sort of beating a dead horse because I've mentioned this so many times, but I mean, the cases against Donald Trump are going to come. And, we have one in March, I think, which is the Jan 6 federal case. There's the Mar-a-Lago docks case, which is in May. And it is a major concern to me that Donald Trump could be leading in all of these swing states. And we'll get into some of the other crosstab stuff. There's some funky stuff going on there with some of the sampling. But if you look at, he's winning all of those swing states in the overall. But if you go down here to the split on registered, and we'll go through registered and likelies, but if you look at registered voters, the question's asked, if Donald Trump were convicted and sentenced to prison and he was still the Republican nominee, would you vote for him? He then trails Biden overall 49-39 among registered voters.
So it's like
happens.
a 20-point flip on that question.
20-point flip, and then among likely, it's 49-40. So just a point improvement among likelies. So like you said, a 20-point flip if Donald Trump is convicted and sentenced in any of those cases. And so, I mean, you can say it's unfair. You can call two systems of justice, but at the end of the day, we have to.
It matters not if the facts present himself here.
Fair or not, it's what the voters ultimately decide to do, and what the voters are telling us is if he is convicted and sentenced, then you're looking at like a Walter Mondale like blowout.
And so, to me, that's what when I saw these numbers, it was like the PTSD hit me, where I have like flashbacks to 2022, where Biden is in the dumpster. His numbers are terrible. Voters are pissed off. And every projection, every polling, every focus group is like giving all these signals. We're going to have a monster red wave. This is going to be off the charts. And we weren't looking closely enough at independent voters who just got scared off by candidates who won the Republican primary.
Well,
right?
and they show up in your camp all the way through until they get to the ballot. Right? They agree with you on the issues. They agree with you on the environment. They agree with you on who caused the bad environment, everything else except the ballot itself.
If I could just put a finer point on it here, those numbers I just gave you is the only reason, I think, the only reason at this point, and we saw it here in our opener, the only reason that Joe Biden hasn't been thrown off this ticket already by the Democrat establishment. the fact that this sort of Damocles hangs over Donald Trump in these cases, and that could make him totally unelectable.
And I
if
feel
he's
like
convicted.
it's by
in my
design.
opinion, I think it's likely he is convicted of the Mar-a-Lago docs case. I've read the indictment, I read the superseding indictment, I've read all of the news coverage after the fact. You can think it's unfair to him, but the reality is I think that is going to be a thing that happens. Now, the interesting little wrinkle, though, the wrinkle in all of this is he may be convicted and obviously would appeal the thing. Who the hell knows when sentencing will happen?
Yeah, the timeline you don't know. I mean, we know when elections are, we know when conventions are.
Right. Sam Bankman-Fried, who was just convicted in that federal case on all of those charges, and oh boy, is that guy going to be in prison for the rest of his life?
Boy.
His sentencing is until
I think you said March, right?
End of March.
And right now it's November 6th.
Yeah, which is wild. Somebody at some point is going to have to explain to us.
Yeah, that's crazy. I don't get it. Maybe we could have Chris Christie back in here to give us a whole rundown and the whole thing. But I'm saying, like, okay, so maybe one of these trials happens and he catches a case and a conviction, and then, the actual sentencing isn't until after the election. Who the hell knows? I'm just telling you that there are rakes to be stepped on through this entire process.
Yeah. And again, it's by design. Like, you see a lot of these cases that are brought up by him. Like the one in New York is just completely absurd.
Yeah.
It's just the most absurd thing.
This is the one that he was on the stand on Monday about, right?
Well, it's the one where they're trying to litigate the value of
right.
It's just like,
well, that's insane.
I don't even know who the aggrieved party is in that. Like, the people, they loaned the money and they got the money back.
The aggrieved party
is what they're saying.
Exactly. It's voters of New York who voted for Letitia James because she ran on "I will send Trump to jail by any means necessary,"
right?
Which is what she's shooting for. But at the same time, again, like I said, the whole PTSD. Like Holmes brought up the excellent point. You look on every issue in 2022, voters were like, who do you trust more on the economy?
Right.
Republicans. Who do you trust to keep records? Republicans. Who do you trust for the border? Republicans. The Republican candidate is saying that the 2020 election was stolen. Do you support this candidate? No. Like, that was the one deciding factor for every independent voter, and it just sunk so many Republicans.
It couldn't get there.
It was unbelievable the effect that one question had on who the independent voter would vote for. They're like, listen, I know the Democrats have ruined the economy. The crime's up because of the Democrats. The border's open because of the Democrats. But this guy says the election was stolen.
I mean, you just look at what the Democrats and the media were able to do with Jan 6 and the election. If you think they can't do that on a Trump conviction on one of these cases.
Well, they haven't started on it yet.
Right.
Right. But here's the bigger case to me, and this is where I find personally the most reason for concern. The survey, this is according to the New York Times, the survey also reveals the extent to which the multiracial and multi-generational coalition that elected Mr. Biden is fraying. Demographic groups that backed Mr. Biden by landslide margins in 2020 are now far more closely contested, as 2/3 of the electorate sees the country moving in the wrong direction. Voters under 30 favor Mr. Biden by only a single percentage point. His lead amongst Hispanic voters is down to single digits, and his advantage in urban areas is half of Mr. Trump's edge in rural regions. And while women are still favored by Mr. Biden, men prefer Mr. Trump by twice as large a margin, reversing the gender advantage that fueled so many Democratic gains in recent years. Black voters, long a bulwark for Democrats and Mr. Biden, are now registering 22% support in these states for Mr. Trump, a level unseen in presidential politics in modern times. Okay. So maybe it's the case that the tide is totally turned and that young people now love Republicans and they love Donald Trump, and Hispanics have, although we've made recent gains, decided that they're ripping the Band-Aid off entirely and they're all just going to become Republicans. And African Americans more than double their support over the last 40 years this election. Or in the first week of November of 2023, they're not so happy about their Democratic president right now, and they're registering their complaints.
Yeah.
So I looked into that and I was like, all right, so where do these people go? Like, what are they doing? Because they're obviously, it would be a much larger margin if they were just in Trump camp. Generic. So the generic ballot is when you just say a Democrat versus Trump, in all the various states that we just listed off that Trump had these commanding leads. In Wisconsin, generic Democrat beats Trump by 12. In Michigan, generic Democrat by 10. Georgia by 8. Arizona by 7. Pennsylvania by 7. Nevada by 1. So that should tell you something. That coalition that the New York Times has artfully laid out as being a problem for Joe Biden is in the first week of November. Do you want to bet when we get into a circumstance where everybody is voting and you've got a 70+% voter turnout in 2024 that those people are not going to vote for the Democrat after they've just told you in the same survey that they favor any Democrat?
Any
Democrat?
Give me anything.
Give me any Democrat over what you got.
Especially if Democrats switch horses in August. Their convention is a full month after the Republican convention. And if Republicans lock somebody in who is convicted, and then Democrats pick somebody other than Joe Biden, Gavin Newsom, Michelle Obama, somebody, they look an awful lot like a generic Democrat for 3 months.
Well, one thing, though, because I feel like we did see a little bit of this in 2022. Like, Republicans are doing a lot better with Hispanics.
Sure. No, I mean, some of this stuff is real.
Yeah, some of the post-COVID stuff. I think you're 100% right, but I think it's also instructive to look at the inverse of Republican, like generic Republican in this poll, even though Donald Trump is leading in all these battlegrounds against Joe Biden. Again, named candidate Joe Biden, who has a 30% approval rating.
Yep.
But, like, some of the Trump people will tell you, like, well, Trump, he's got like unique swag.
Right.
Like Waka Flocka Flame endorsed him, so like he's going to do really well with African American voters.
Right.
Which, like, I'm sorry, but this is fool's gold.
Yep.
This was tried before. Remember, the first ad that Donald Trump's campaign ran in 2020 was the ad on Alice Johnson, the Super Bowl ad. They spent millions and millions of dollars to air the thing, talking about how they'd done this reform to let people out.
Criminal
justice reform, right? And that was going to like help us win all these African American voters. Of course, that didn't happen.
No, they got literally historical average.
Yeah,
it was literally smack dab in the middle of it.
But so if you're somebody who supports Donald Trump and you're like, no, he's got this swag and this unique thing that's helping him with all of these voters. Let me read you the generic Republican against Joe Biden. All right, so Trump leads by 10 in Nevada. Generic Republican against Joe Biden leads by 15. Trump in Georgia leads by 6. Generic Republican leads by 16. In Arizona, Trump leads by 5. Generic Republican leads by 18 points. 18. 1-8. In Michigan, Trump leads by 5. Generic Republican leads by 14. In Pennsylvania, Trump leads by 4. Generic leads by 14. In Wisconsin, Biden leads by 2. Generic Republican leads by 15 points. I mean, Nikki Haley's numbers in here are also fantastic. And DeSantis is doing really well, too. Haley's numbers actually look ideal. I mean, ideal numbers here. She's leading everywhere in double digits in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. But the generic Republican overall, which tells you everything you need to know about Joe Biden, right?
Yeah.
That's what this ultimately is about. It's not some unique thing that Donald Trump has unlocked. The reality is Donald Trump is doing well, but Joe Biden is doing fucking terrible.
Yeah. I mean, that's it.
In a current snapshot in time a year out from the election, which doesn't inform largely anything, but it reflects how much the Democratic voters, those younger voters that you were talking about, Holmes, are really pissed off at this president and want anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, so bottom lining it, you've got two candidates who are historically unpopular that are the likely nominees. What I think Democrats, and we've talked about this a lot on the show, is that Democrats have always been betting that Donald Trump is so unpalatable because of that question that has been asked in some of these polls about would you ever consider voting for Donald Trump, and it's like 54, 56% no. They've always thought that ceiling for him is so low that they can get anybody over the finish line. I think what this poll may suggest, and what people like David Axelrod and Barack Obama are beginning to talk about, which tells you everything you need to know about the internal conversations in the Democratic Party, is that although almost any Democrat can beat Donald Trump, Joe Biden might not be able to. And that is a perfect reflection on just how bad this administration is going.
Yeah.
It is shocking.
It's what's most interesting about this is like right now, I'd much rather be us than them. That's the great news. The bad news is there are rakes that can be stepped on here right before Super Tuesday when Donald Trump has that case on the federal side, on the federal Jan 6 thing. There's the May case on Mar-a-Lago docks. I'd remind everybody in 2016, Donald Trump became the presumptive nominee after the Indiana primary in early May.
Yeah.
So if that timeline holds again, you end up in a situation where he's on trial for the second time. I think the electorate looks a lot different in its view of him if he's convicted of one of those things. So it's something people need to think about.
Almost everything they've done has gone backwards. It's clearly highlighted right now by the chaos across the world. But we did a couple of segments this summer about when they came up with their bumper sticker, Bidenomics. And they rolled that all out as that this is going to be the thing.
Yeah.
That we can showcase our accomplishments. NBC News did a piece here yesterday that says no one seems to like Bidenomics. No one. And then they go through and they interview all these people and they go, I don't know what the hell that is. It's all a jumbled mess. And then at the end, they think that whatever's been going on in the economy, Joe Biden did it, and they hate it. So it's not as if, when you look at an election and you're an incumbent in a tough place, it could be reflective of an environment, a particularly bad moment in time. And then you try to look out at how you would build the case to try to get to 51 on a ballot. Part of that is taking down your opponent. I would argue with Donald Trump, there's not much more that they would need to do to take him down. Like they basically are where they're going to be in November of 24. But to build Joe Biden back up, where's the path? What do you sell? There's not a goddamn thing anywhere here, from the economy to foreign policy to immigration to the Justice Department to, he's got a third of his base out in front of the damn White House calling for the extermination of Israel.
Right.
There's nothing, he's locked in.
Right.
I'm not sure, plus his own physical limitations, which, if we're being honest, the conventional wisdom is if you get yourself into a rut, there's no way he's going to be able to dig himself out because he's limited. He can't. You can't put him on stage and have him barnstorm the country and win people over.
Yeah, he can't walk up a flight of stairs to Air Force One. You're telling me he's going to get himself out of a rut?
Which is why I think that we are right on the idea that they're going to replace him eventually. We've been saying this since February of this year. That Joe Biden is not capable of making the case that a candidate would have to make to overcome the problems that he has. You just put your finger on probably the biggest problem that Democrats have under Joe Biden heading into this election, and that's the disarray that all of a sudden is inside of their party, especially among the young voters who are supporting Hamas and don't like Israel. And they are so split up on this, and it is a real thing. Reporters are genuinely covering this story, and it's a problem, and it's not getting any better for Democrats. The only way to move beyond that is to switch Joe Biden out for somebody that they can pretend they're listening to your problems too.
Yeah, I think that's the easiest thing that they could do. And as we've discussed, you have to do it after the context of the primary election. They now have a little bit of a problem there with Dean Phillips being somebody who's running. I don't expect for him to win any Democratic votes. But if he's in a primary and you got him bailing out, you're going to have to do some serious backroom jujitsu to make somebody else other than the guy who's running against him the nominee.
But if you look,
they're not above it. They'll do it. Don't get me wrong. They'll do it. It's just going to be real ugly.
They will, and they can. If you look at the history from 2020 when Biden became the nominee, he was running against at least a half dozen multi-million-dollar heavyweights in that primary, and all of a sudden there was this overnight consolidation where Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg,
Amy Klobuchar,
all of them were done with the snap of a finger, and it's Democrats have within their system the ability to manipulate the process so that the person that they want, that will be supported by the media on day one, the person that they want, they can name. They can do that.
Yeah.
But do you think the Democrats have the ability of just keeping the spigot on from a fundraising standpoint, like a small dollar standpoint and everything, if they replace the nominee?
I think that they've got a real problem in the term that we're in now, looking at all these numbers. I think if you gave anybody something to cheer for, the spigot would come on like wildfire. They've been able to consolidate the coalition of small dollar donors because they have one leader of the party, but that's becoming, as evidenced by this poll, very difficult and very unpalatable.
But that's if Amy McGrath can raise $30-50 million, any of them can raise.
No, I get it. I'm just wondering if, like, I guess I'm wondering sort of the inverse. Like, is the fact that the spigot is still on, even though half his party doesn't want him to be the nominee, that it's an insulating factor for Joe Biden that the money will be there?
Yeah, I mean, it could be. But I mean, look, the other thing that nobody talks about is the fact that this guy's not really running a campaign. He really doesn't have a campaign headquarters. We never hear from a campaign manager or campaign spokesperson. We never see any campaign evidence of anything happening across. Like, to replace a campaign is generally pretty tough to do because of the infrastructure involved. They don't have infrastructure.
Yeah, but it's all sort of at the DNC, almost like it's sort of lying in wait for somebody else.
Right?
20% of the DNC just signed a petition saying that Joe Biden is wrong on Israel.
Yeah.
I mean,
did they sign their names though?
But that's a good transition because look, this is one of the saddest stories you're ever going to see if you are a Democrat anywhere, and it's an Axios piece entitled "Behind the Curtain: Tearing Apart Democrats." No issue. Just think about this for a moment. Just wrap your head around this. No issue threatens to break President Biden's fragile Democratic coalition like Israel's response to the Hamas terrorist attack.
Not the terrorist attack, the response to it.
Just let that sit for a second.
They're just sickos.
It's really something. I mean, it's just I would have, I don't know. I knew for so long, like you saw the left with their whole like BLM critical race theory, the like madness which had enveloped them, where essentially, like I've argued, it's like anti-civilization. Like these people just want chaos.
Marxist, yeah.
And to see it just come bubbling to the top, where they were like these terrorist attacks of killing children, women at in their homes, murdering them and videotaping it. That's actually decolonization.
Yeah.
Like that level of sick and twisted thinking has captured the party. And you see it across campuses. You see it within this administration where you see these stories of like people who work at the State Department, people who work at the White House are like, I'm actually on the side of decolonization. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
It's an indictment of the Democratic Party. It's an indictment of the progressive view of the world. Yep. It's an indictment of a lack of courage by leaders within the Democratic Party to do anything to have moral clarity about issues that require not a moment of thought. When you have a terrorist organization that's decapitating babies, raping, beheading, doing all kinds of just unthinkable things to innocent civilians, and you're concerned about what the response to that might be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not difficult. Hamas, all they need to do is release the hostages and surrender. The terrorist organization just needs to surrender and release the hostages, and it stops. Why is it that the left has taken the position of we stop shooting at them?
Yeah, it's Holmes, I think I said this last week. We were talking, and it's like, after 9/11, there certainly were some elements of like the far left who were like, America had this coming, or these are the chickens coming home to roost.
Yeah, these are the Obama priest or pastor and all that.
Yeah, goddamn America. Yeah. But like what you didn't have is people after 9/11 being like, Osama bin Laden is right. Like Al Qaeda is correct, and their philosophy is correct. And there are people now today that are like, no, Hamas is correct. Like decolonize. Get rid of Israel.
The other thing that didn't happen after 9/11 is you didn't have random lefties walking up to every memorial with pictures and flowers on it and tearing them down.
Right.
I mean, it is so stunning to me watching these leftists walk around and just tear down these posters of like kids who are being held hostage or
at Harvard, the editor of the Harvard Law Review.
Yeah. It was accosting a Jewish student. Yeah, on video, was caught, and that guy's going to be a lawyer someday.
Yeah,
if not like
he might run for president. I mean, like Barack Obama,
or the Democrats might nominate him for the Supreme Court. Like that is it's stunning.
It's sicko stuff. But if you notice, at least in my lifetime, I don't think this is true forever, but in my lifetime, anytime a Democrat wins a White House or wins big majorities in the House or Senate, it's by confusing voters in the center left and center right about who it is that they're going into bed with.
This is a good point.
And their best stuff, because the coalition that supports up the Democratic Party agree on nothing. You've got environmental extremists and union members. One cancels the other. The livelihood of a union base is forever exterminated if the environmental extremism get their way, yet they're part of the coalition, right? You've got teachers' unions who are all about trying to ensure that there's no school choice, that they have a clamp down on public schools, public education, and they can keep failing children in urban areas across this country. At the same time, they've got an African-American base that votes 90% Democrat. They're in conflict. All of these things are in conflict, and when they're most successful by tricking the other people into the other one not existing. And what they've done here is really quite magical, because they've got a Jewish base of voters that somehow has liked historically what Joe Biden has said about the state of Israel. And, in fairness, they have some reason to believe him and take him at his word for supporting Israel over a course of a Senate career. Now, he's had terrible foreign policy, but on the specific issue, fine. What they didn't know was that they were getting into bed with it looks by the latest polling, somewhere between 30 and 50% of young voters who also endorse Hamas. Those are also Democratic voters. That is a conflict. And once these things come out into the open, it's where you get polls like this. When you're having a national discussion about whether or not it is appropriate as an American to support a terrorist organization killing not just Jewish people in Israel, but Americans, and taking them hostage and not doing anything about it, but rather talking about the dangers and evils of the state of Israel. I mean, I don't know. You got a real problem. And I think that they're going to have this rippling effect over all of these issues. The issue that has bound them together, though, over the last 4 years, if we're being completely honest, is Donald Trump. And that's the reason why all of the little pieces of the Democratic coalition are willing to ignore their mutual exclusive interests and vote together as Democrats, because they think that Donald Trump's worse. And if you saw by the polls that you read on the generic ballot, or the Nikki Haley numbers, or Ron DeSantis numbers, all those things, it goes away pretty quickly. They refracture. So, look, can Donald Trump win this election? Absolutely. He can, and I think these poll numbers showed it. Are Democrats in deep trouble with Joe Biden? Yes, absolutely. But if Republicans had anything other than Donald Trump at this point, I think you'd be almost measuring curtains in the Oval Office. Because I don't think that this coalition of Democrats can be put back together fully under any other circumstance than you got to vote against that guy.
And one thing I'd like to bring up semi-tangentially. So it said that Quinnipiac poll on Thursday showed the stark age divide. Respondents were asked, do you approve or disapprove of the way Israel is responding to the October 7th Hamas terrorist attack? Overall, half approved and 35% disapproved. But only 32% of respondents aged 18 to 34 approved of Israel's response. I think what needs to be brought up is there was a study that was done by a computer scientist who tried to reverse engineer the algorithm on TikTok, right? And China has been doing their damnedest for anyone who's under the age of 30 to bombard them on TikTok with as much pro-Hamas, anti-Israel content as possible. Like, this guy said he's never seen any instance of where one singular focus on one issue was bombarded. China sees the weakness of Joe Biden globally. They see how divided this country can become as they use TikTok as their agent to divide and conquer the country. And so far, the response from Joe Biden has been they opened an office for TikTok in the White House with like 12 staffers, where their focus is on getting more content on TikTok and
how have we
interfacing
not banned
with TikTok.
this yet?
That's the thing.
How
Number
have we
one,
not banned TikTok?
this is a clear example of a foreign country trying to destroy America from inside, psychologically and economically. They've been doing it, and no action has been taken to ban them. When you see how much the needle has moved on this issue, because that age group, I mean, it was stunning to me that seeing polling, there are more people under the age of 24. If they want an answer to a question, they do a search on TikTok before they do a search on Google. It's become where they go to for answers.
And you ask your average Democrat that the kids like it.
That's why.
They like it.
That's why. They made a deal with the devil. They're like, this can help us reach the youth and convince them to vote for us. And China's like, okay, yeah.
The kids like fentanyl, too. Are you going to do something about that? I mean, honestly, it's just so sick. That is the state of the Democratic Party, though.
Yeah.
It is. It really
They like
is.
it. Give it to me.
They like it.
Gimme.
They like it. And maybe nobody will ask any questions about our Hamas supporters.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, were defiling the White House over the weekend. Did you guys see that?
Yeah.
It was an insurrection. I think, was it an NBC reporter who said it was a passionate protest?
It was very passionate.
Yeah. Just, them trying to jump the fence and covering it in like bloody hands.
And by the way, the bloody hands thing, do you guys know the backstory to the bloody hands thing?
Yeah.
Duncan, do you know that?
No.
This? So the bloody hands thing has long been a symbol of Palestinian plight, right? And that's why they have seen the protests in Gaza or whatever with the bloody hands or whatever. The backdrop to that was that there was two, I think they were IDF or they were police officers, Israeli.
Two IDFs.
Two IDF soldiers who were off duty and were basically captured by a Hamas-led mob.
They took a wrong turn
Yeah.
on a street, and during an uprising, a mob grabs these people.
They kill them, dismember them.
Oh.
And one of the killers, who was in potentially like the place of dismembering, put his hands up on the window, and there was a picture taken of him, this young guy, standing there with his bloody hands.
With the blood of the guys he just
Yes.
cut up? Oh, that's the most
they literally
disgusting shit I've ever
tore
heard
them
in my
to
life.
pieces and were passing around their body parts.
That is what we're talking about here. So like when
My
you hear...
God, and nobody writes this.
Nobody writes it.
Nobody writes this.
When
I
you're-
mean, you haven't seen that much red on a wall since every single one of these kibbutzes in southwestern Israel. It's disgusting.
It's all over the entire White House fence. And, they're out there chanting from the river to the sea. By the way, that's the genocide of the Jewish people. That's what that means.
And you have a member
That's
of
not
Congress
two-state.
tweeting that out.
Did you believe that? Did you see what Rashida Tlaib tweeted?
Yeah.
She tweeted that, no, this is an aspirational
Yeah, it's
goal.
it's nuanced.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
River, sea.
Yeah.
It's geographic.
Couple of bodies of water. We like the water.
And that's the thing.
We like the fishing.
For years, we had Democrats
They're
in the
so
media being like,
dishonest.
this symbol, this okay with your hand, it's white supremacy. But they're like, well, river to sea is a nuance thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. If you think about all of the people who've been accused of white supremacy because they had their thumb up or weird, I don't even know what
You have
all
a
the
kid
things
who
were.
was accused of white supremacy for standing and looking at someone.
Yeah, right.
Right.
They tried
and
to
these are
ruin
the
his
same
life.
these are the same people who try to ruin his life. Nick Sandman's life.
Yep.
A high schooler
Right.
on a field trip to Washington D.C. at the March for Life.
Yep.
Remember, all these journalists tried to cancel that kid, and now all these journalists try to white knight for Hamas supporting
Bingo.
college kids who are saying, no, I support that and end Israel.
I think-
And they're like, well, we can't cancel those kids. We can cancel Nick Sandman, but can't cancel those kids.
I think it's time everybody just demand a moral clarity and use this
It
moment.
doesn't exist for them.
But use this moment in terms of the press. You have to force change on this stuff because they're acting as though, like they said, a passionate protest, which the symbolism is the mutilation of IDF soldiers' bodies some 25 years ago that they've used as the symbol of their freedom. That's not it. That ain't it, folks. Anyway. I want to get a little different topic because I'm getting too worked up. Do you guys see this house for sale in California?
Yeah, right before the show, I did. This is amazing.
So, according to MSN.com, a California house is listed for $1.55 million. There's a meth lab inside. California house that recently went on the market for $1.5 million has a lot of perks. It's within walking distance to a major mall. It's spacious enough for a family. It's located in a safe neighborhood, but there's one caveat that might deter potential buyers. As recently as March, the previous owner allegedly used the home's garage as a methamphetamine lab. Keller Williams Realty's listing for the San Jose house notes that the home, which is considered contaminated, still contains an inactive lab. Spokesman for the Santa Clara County's health department said in a statement that nobody can enter the house until it's decontaminated. The home will be turned over to the buyer in its current state, said Keller Williams Realty.
You're not allowed to walk in. You just have to buy it sight unseen.
The meth lab conveys. It's important.
I mean, is that listed under residential or commercial?
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. It seems like it's a working lab.
Like it's a turnkey business operation in a safe neighborhood. Good transportation for your goods.
You too can be Breaking Bad.
Exactly. Like that's the thing. Is like this is essentially just Breaking Bad simulator on Zillow.
It's a 6-bedroom, 2,700 square feet. Jesus, think about the prices here.
It's in San Jose too.
2,700 square feet in San Jose is $1.5 million, and it's got a meth lab. You should see, first of all, there's a fence around it, and it's like boarded up. It looks like shit. But
well, this is like startup ready. You've got six bedrooms in San Jose. It's right there in Silicon Valley, and there's meth in the house to keep them coding all night long. Like this has the makings of a next great startup right there. That's a startup incubator.
The previous owner of the house, a 36-year-old Peter Kasarev, was arrested in March on multiple charges related to the said meth lab, the aforementioned meth lab. The house, which has a pool, guys, has a pool. So really, I mean, you could actually mass produce.
Yeah, you could really go for both.
You could really go. It has a pool. It last sold for $1.5 million in March 2021. According to Redfin. So it's retaining its market value, which is nice.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's a tough real estate market, but you know what? I mean, this will pay for itself.
The meth.
In time.
It's just, I mean, interest rates where they are, though, you almost need a drug dealing side hustle to afford a house in this country. It's unbelievable.
Maybe just a couple of batches to get things rolling, right? A down payment, make sure you square that away.
Right.
That always works out well.
You get the meth lab going, and then you refinance.
Perfect.
There was a lot of Halloween news, and we're not going to cover a lot of it, but there was one interesting thing. According to NBC, an anthropologist found a human skull in a Florida thrift store in the Halloween section. It was real. The shopper recognized the skull to be much more than a spooky decoration, and the Lee County Sheriff's Office was notified. When detectives responded to the store in North Cleveland Avenue in Fort Myers on Saturday, they recovered the skull, and it was believed to be a human skull. So they said the skull was located in a storage unit that was purchased years prior. So they've had this thing around for a while. They didn't have any further comment. I suppose you test the skull? They said they know it's human.
There's so many questions in this situation.
But don't like cadaver people have stuff out there?
That's the thing is, so like, you can designate whether you want to, after you die, give your body to science or whether you want to be an organ donor. I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this. I'm not an organ donor. It's not going to happen.
Wait.
Because you don't want your head to end up at a thrift store.
I don't know if I'm going to end, if I get hit by a car, I'm in the emergency room and some doctor's like, you know what, my friend, he needs a kidney.
Oh, come on.
You don't know what these doctors
You think they're going to pull the plug early to take your stuff?
I don't trust anybody. All of me is going to hell in one piece. They're not going to take anything from me. I don't want my head to end up in a Goodwill.
I will say this.
I don't trust these doctors.
The idea of my head being in a thrift store is unsatisfying.
Yeah, I don't trust doctors. I don't trust the science. I don't trust any of it.
Someone's like picking it up 10 years later and like, hey, kids, you want to play? And then some kid's like booting it around the backyard.
I think
my kids would be playing catch up.
You're an organ donor?
I think you really buried the lead. Like, it wasn't the organ donations. It was like that you're assured you're going to hell. I believe in you, Smug. You can get to heaven.
I'm going to make a good case. I'm going to make a good case.
Okay. Well, not if you're so stingy with your organs. Jeez.
And step down the wrong road.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I Smug, your head would be great on display somewhere. Last thing, Gen Z in workplaces. Now, you've heard us talk about this. I know Smug has some pretty strong opinions. But they would like, this is according to Study Finds, which is a big McDaniel favorite, that millennials, they want basically all the salaries of everybody to be public that they work with. And they're like perfectly comfortable with their own salary being public. Because every manager knows what's good is to breed a good resentment amongst colleagues inside of your workplace.
Yeah.
Right? That's important stuff to do, right?
I mean, so here's the thing is, I do not think it should be public for two reasons. Number one, I think a fun part of work is negotiating. Get as much as you can of it. If you're good at it, you get a lot of money. That's an important part. The art of the deal, very critical. Number two, like Holmes says, it breeds resentment because if it's posted publicly, you're gonna have people who are just especially among these Gen Z, barely doing anything at their job, right? Except complaining, essentially. They're like, why is this person making more than me? Granted, that other person is actually effective at their job. Everyone likes them. They don't bitch about stuff. They don't bring their drama to work. But the Zoomer's like, listen, I always show up complaining about all my problems. I give everyone a hard time. No one likes having me around the office. Shouldn't I make the same pay as the guy who actually does his work? You don't need that. You don't need that at all. Honestly, number one, most Zoomers should not be in the workplace at this point. They're, for the most part, not good people. They're troublemakers. These are self-centered people, and they think everything is owed to them.
I think I could accept their conditions under a few conditions of my own.
Oh, I'd love to hear this.
So, if they want all the salaries to be public, we're also going to make public the cost of employing them, the healthcare costs, the 401k costs, all the costs that go into hiring an employee. Also, the fridge will be replaced by a vending machine that will cost them money.
Sure. Nice.
And every time that they come into the office, they have to swipe their credit card so they can help cover rent for the office.
Nice. That sounds
and
good.
they could know all the other costs that go into running a business.
All of that should be public.
Because for them, they think it's just a salary and it's black and white and this is a thing. It's input, output. It's paid.
Yeah.
And I do work.
Yeah.
And it's there's a lot of other things that go into running a business other than keeping your ass employed. And all of those things cost money too.
I feel like the personnel file should also be open for business.
Yeah.
And once you get complaints, and your reviews.
We'll have an airing of grievances.
And things like that. If you want it all to be public, let's have it all to be public.
Right.
And now you'll know, and everybody else will too, why it is that you make slightly less than the guy sitting next to you.
Yeah, he's Zoomers. Nick, you're a Zoomer. Yeah, Nick's a Zoomer.
Nick Spaghetti.
He's probably all for this.
And you know what else? You know what else Zoomers have done? It's them who are behind this whole thing of if you go to the register, the guy can scan one thing, put it in a bag, and then when you're checking out, it'll say, would you like to tip 10, 20%? And the Zoomers are going to just stare at you. Nobody. You don't get shit. If there was a robot here doing your job, I'd rather scan it through the damn robot. Tip me. I'm paying for your salary. Tip me. Give me a break, bro.
It's so funny he's saying all of this in a suit.
It's so good. It's so good. I can't wait to see him walk around Miami, briefing the youngsters.
Nobody gets my organs. I'm going to hell, and you don't get a tip.
Oh, it's so good. I love it. All right, so with all of that, we need to get to our interview, the legendary Senator Kennedy. Well, we thought we'd have some fun today on the Ruthless Variety program, and I personally can't think of anything I'd think of that had more fun than bringing Senator Kennedy in here to talk about a range of issues, both high-minded and not.
Absolutely. Anything you gentlemen want to talk about. Why don't y'all each describe your first sexual experience? and then I'll bat clean up, okay? After you guys go first, okay?
Michael, go ahead.
Here, let me describe Michael's first. Okay.
No, this is good.
He was about 14.
Okay. All right.
It was night. It was dark. He was nervous. He was scared to death. And he was alone.
Oh my gosh! Well, welcome and thank you. This is probably your first time here in the Ruthless studio. We've done interviews before.
I've done it. This is the first time I've been in person.
Yeah.
I talked to you guys by phone one time.
Yeah, that's right. Right off the plane, we got you.
Yeah.
Right back to a big week of work.
Yeah, I'm out of Louisiana and left America and came to Washington.
Washington, D.C., no kidding. Yeah, you happen to see all the painting across the street with the Palestinian protesters?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
We've got it going on in Louisiana, too, and, of course, on our college campuses. Look, it's America. You're entitled to say what you want, but we're learning very quickly that a lot of our college students believe in diversity equity, exclusion, and the right to kill Jews.
That's pretty much it.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Kind of their.
You know what's sad is that it feels like this has just been laying under the radar here, and it just got exploded into the face of everybody around us. I mean, we knew about the diversity, equity, all the nonsense they've been talking about forever, but the rampant anti-Semitism is a bit jarring, even by college standards.
Well, if folks would actually read a book, and they would understand that we have tried a two-state solution a number of times, even as far back as 1947, and the Palestinian leadership has rejected it. And there's been a lot of rhetoric about how Jews, most of the Jews in Israel, are not from Europe, they're from the Middle East. And you say, well, the Middle East, yeah, they're refugees too. Mm-hmm. They were kicked out of Arab countries like Egypt and Syria and Lebanon, and they were told to go to Israel. So when you want to talk about refugees, if you're going to be historically accurate, you have to include most of the Jews in Israel. Mm-hmm. But again, that would require you to read a book.
Yeah, well, that's not something that's happening.
We don't want to get carried away.
Yeah, higher education shouldn't be forced, that kind of thing. Well, I want to talk to you about a range of those, but we can get to it.
Okay.
The thing that I think we need to spend some time on, and I saw remarks that you'd made to...
I deny everything.
To Chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Dick Durbin, regarding his latest stunt.
Yeah.
And what I'm talking about is that ever since there has been a sort of robust majority, conservative majority on the Supreme Court, you've seen them trying to undermine the Supreme Court itself in every single possible way. We've seen huge left-wing dark money groups funding hit pieces in mainstream media publications. We've seen them trying to undermine the integrity of the court, left, right, and center. I think we've crossed into a new area. And,
I think
this
we have
is
too.
What I'm talking about specifically is the suggestion, it sounds like you might even be voting on this week, that the Judiciary Committee under Democratic leadership is going to subpoena private citizens in an attempt to try to further undermine what they say is an ethics issue within the court. I saw your remarks. Obviously, you don't see this the same way.
No, I think I think that this whole issue can be distilled to the following. Many of my Democratic colleagues believe that the Supreme Court ought to be a super legislature.
Yep.
They believe that Supreme Court justices should be able to rewrite the Constitution every other Thursday to advance a social or economic agenda that they can't get through Congress or past the voters.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the way most Americans look at the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
My Democratic colleagues are very upset at some of the new appointees, and they're upset about some of the opinions. Well, we've all had Supreme Court opinions we've disagreed with, but you don't try to destroy the Supreme Court as an institution. Many of my Democratic colleagues say this is about ethics. It is not. Mm-hmm. They just disagree with some of the Supreme Court opinions, and they want to tear it down. And if ever there was any doubt, remember when Senator Schumer is the Democratic leader, of course, in the Senate. He goes on the steps of the United States Supreme Court in front of God and country, and this is what he says. He didn't bubble wrap it. This is what he said. I still love to read this. Schumer says, quote, I'm quoting now, I want to tell you, Gorsuch, not Justice Gorsuch, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions.
Amazing.
Now, that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, there was a left-wing lunatic who tried to assassinate Justice Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
We after the Dodd decision came out and before, there were a lot of protests at Supreme Court justices' houses, which is illegal under federal law. But Attorney General Garland allowed the protests to go on and even instructed his agents not to arrest anybody. And Justice Kavanaugh was the target of an assassin. But look, they can pretty this up all they want to and try to bubble wrap it. They don't like the opinions of the United States Supreme Court. And I'm sorry, they're entitled to that opinion, but they need to go talk to their priest or their congressman. They shouldn't be trying to destroy the United States Supreme Court as an institution.
Which is what they've been trying to do here now for quite some time. I mean, going into the election, it was not so hidden secret that they would have loved, but for 2 Democratic votes, to basically pack the Supreme Court.
Yeah, they tried every way they could.
And now that they're sort of hemmed in here, at least for a little while, what they're trying to do is just try to invalidate it altogether, at least undermine the integrity of the court, and do what Senator Schumer was talking about, which is basically make them regret anything outside of liberal orthodoxy in terms of a decision before the Supreme Court.
Well, when you unpack their allegations and drill down, what you find is they say the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't have an ethics code. Yes, it does. They follow the ethics code of the Judicial Conference, which is an association of all of federal judges. Until March of 2023, the ethics code by the Judicial Conference didn't require federal judges to report hospitality. So the fishing trip that Justice Alito went on didn't have to be reported.
Right.
The Democrats can't point to one single solitary case where the justices have had a conflict where they didn't recuse themselves.
Right.
And I've heard Democratic witness after Democratic witness come before the Judiciary Committee and say they're bought. But when you say, okay, tell me, which ones are bought? Just name them.
And what do they pay for?
And then the latest strategy is say, well, Justice Thomas borrowed some money to buy an RV.
Yeah, I noticed this.
First, I'm glad the man's getting out a little bit, with an RV. I hope he's tailgating and drinking a few beers. But he did borrow the money. He paid it back.
That's the thing.
Right.
That's what they don't like pointing out.
I didn't see that one.
It was paid off.
It was paid off.
Right.
His lawyer says it. He says it. The records say it. But the Democrats keep saying, well, he borrowed money from a friend. Well, he paid it back, and the friend has never had a case before the Supreme Court.
To your point, it's all rhetorical. I mean, you drill just an inch deep into all of it, and it's nonsense. And now the subpoena, it's Leonard Leo, right? I think everybody in our audience knows who Leonard Leo is, but he's been an instrumental person at the center of trying to create a conservative right-of-center judiciary, one that interprets the Constitution, doesn't make it up on the fly, follows the law, weird sort of outrageous things like that. And he's been extraordinarily effective. So now you get a potential subpoena from the Democrats to Leonard Leo, as if that has any bearing on the integrity of the court, right?
Well, their timing is impeccable. I mean, here we are domestically. Most of the people in my state have to sell blood plasma in order to go to the grocery store. I mean, inflation is gutting them like a fish. The southern border is an open, bleeding wound.
Yeah.
We don't talk about it anymore, but we still have millions of Americans who are too poor to be sick because Obamacare has raised their premiums about threefold.
Mm-hmm.
The world is on fire as a result of President Biden acting like a big weenie and believing that he can achieve peace through weakness. And what do my Democratic colleagues want to do? They want to attack a separate branch of government.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. And my advice to them is, look, you're entitled to disagree. I've disagreed. I try to read every Supreme Court opinion that comes out. I disagree with some of them. But my Democratic colleagues need to fill out a hurt feelings report. We'll file it away and move on. And let's deal. I mean, the Judiciary Committee has jurisdiction of the border. You know what we've done? Nothing.
Yeah.
Zero. Nada. Zilch. because our chairman won't bring up anything.
And I think that's also, it brings up a very critical point about this whole situation is this is an attempt by Democrats to essentially nullify the Constitution. They don't want 3 separate branches of government. They want to, while they have a Senate majority, dictate to the Supreme Court what they can and can't do, essentially how they can rule. They want to completely usurp the independent judiciary.
Well, Smug, may I call you Smug?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, Senator.
I'll call you Mr. Smug. It's that, but it's all. Many of my Democratic colleagues see the Supreme Court differently. I see the Supreme Court as interpreting the Constitution, calling the balls and strikes, not making law, telling us what the law is, not what the law ought to be. And that's not the way many Democrats see it. They think that Supreme Court justices ought to be politicians with robes, and they want their politicians on the court.
Well, it shows in who they appoint, right? I mean, their nominees largely are politicians in robes.
Yeah, and you see it in President Biden's nominees to the positions on the federal bench at the Court of Appeal level.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
And at the district court level.
Yeah.
He's had some good appointments, not many, but some, and when they're good, I vote for them. We killed 5 of President Trump's appointees.
You were an equal opportunity.
We were.
Panel in that regard.
But most, I shouldn't say most, many of President Biden's appointees to the lower courts, that they're activists who happen to be lawyers.
Yeah.
We had one the other. It's going to come up for a vote Thursday. This one magistrate judge you're trying to elevate requires everybody in his courtroom to stand up and announce their pronouns.
Come on.
He does. He issued an order. You have to stand up and say, "My name is Josh. My pronoun is," but you've got 3 choices.
Oh, he gives you the choices?
Yeah. You got Mr., Mix, what?
Mix,
MX.
Okay.
Or Miss. You can't say Mrs. and when I had him in front of the committee, I asked him about this. He said it's voluntary. He lied. I showed him the document.
Yeah.
And like he said, well, people don't have to do it if they don't want to. And so let me get this straight.
They joined the judge.
You're the judge. You're waiting to hand. They're looking to you to hand down a decision, okay? And you're going to tell the judge that you think he's full of crapola right before he decides your case. Who do you think you are, Donald Trump? I mean,
that's truly remarkable.
Yeah.
And I like that he's provided a list of options.
Yeah.
And these are your options.
I mean, that if somebody wants to identify by a pronoun, that's their business.
Sure.
But if you don't want to participate in that, then you shouldn't be required to by a federal judge who is supposed to be impartial.
Oh, wow.
But you watch, he will not have a single Democrat vote against him.
Oh, it's just so depressing, but it's very predictable in this stage. So what's
you guys didn't know I was going to do all the talking, did you?
That's not what we hoped. We hoped. Everybody hears us all the time. Back to the subpoenaing of like the Leonard Leos and the Harlan Crows and folks like that. So is this, you're gonna have to actually vote on this?
Oh yeah, we're gonna have a fight.
Do you think that? So do you think that
we're going to have a lot of suggestions about other people that that need to be subpoenaed?
Yeah. I bet you do. I can't wait to tune into that. But I mean, they have to know. Maybe they don't because they keep doing this to themselves over and over and over and over again. But the new precedent that they set by doing that sort of thing is going to haunt them.
They're not interested. You're right, Josh. But they are, in my opinion, they're not interested in a few documents from Rob Arkley or Leonard Leo or Harlan Crow. Where they're going with this, and I don't know whether Senator Durbin's on board or he's being pushed, but I think where they're going with this is ultimately to try to subpoena Justice Clarence Thomas. And that will, of course, provoke a serious constitutional question.
Oh,
I don't think Congress has the authority. And but I think that's where they're going.
That's just unbelievable.
This is the warm-up.
It feels like there is no precedent in this particular area that they're not willing to break at some level.
But they've done that forever.
Yeah.
I mean, for our younger listeners who aren't really aware of this, and a lot of this seems like novel arguments, you have to understand, I mean, all the way back from Bork to what they did to Justice Thomas, which he called rightly a high-tech lynching, to Miguel Estrada. You know, documents came out that the Democratic establishment wanted to keep him off the circuit court because they were worried that, you know, Republicans would have a young, successful Hispanic on the United States Supreme Court.
And the first Hispanic, which is what truly galled them.
Truly galled them. And so they had to kill that in the crib. That couldn't be allowed to happen. So they've been brazen, naked partisans on the Supreme Court for our entire lives. And I'm curious, in your, you know, experience having dealt with this when we were in the majority, you know, with Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, what did you find to be the most brazenly partisan activity that the Senate Democrats engaged with during those confirmations?
Oh, the allegations against Brett Kavanaugh.
Yeah,
hands
no
down.
question.
Hands
question.
down.
That radicalized a lot of us.
Yeah.
Bringing forth the allegations well after the fact, the flimsiest of evidence. After we had FBI after FBI after FBI check, I went down and to our classified area in our SCIF, as we call it, and looked at the FBI analysis. There was nothing to it, but refusing to concede that the allegations weren't true.
Yeah.
It was a freak show.
Yeah.
The whole hearing was a freak show.
And the lawyer
you had people jumping. You had protesters in the audience jumping up and down and screaming, and they had on these vagina hats. Remember that? I mean, I don't know how else to describe them. They were hats that looked like a vagina. And you're going, you know, these people... These people need to put down the bong, man.
Yeah.
And they would haul them out and put them outside, and then they'd come back in. It was embarrassing.
Well, and then you had, you know, like maybe 3 of your Democratic colleagues there sitting there, you know, trying to launch a presidential campaign at the time. So they were incentivized to be as lunatic as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a new low for us.
Yeah.
And again, the lawyer who brought forth these false allegations against Kavanaugh is currently in prison.
Yeah,
trying to extort companies.
Yeah.
That was the gang bang allegations that he had. I mean, it was just so.
And they're brought up in. I will never forget his wife. This is supposed to be a proud day for that family that he worked so hard to achieve a nomination to the Supreme Court, and then you see his wife in tears as he's being smeared.
Yeah. Well, it was tough on his kids too. Now, I believe in tough hearings. I ask tough questions.
You've done a few yourself.
You have.
That's all fine. But this kind personalizing everything like they did, frivolous allegations, Michael Avenatti style.
The creepy porn lawyer.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, how you doing there, man, in prison?
I don't know if he's a listener.
Does he have? Do you think you got YouTube in prison?
I don't know. Maybe
he's probably saving up his money for a Kit Kat bar.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just couldn't stand the guy. It was just so clear, and many of the cable stations kept having him on. It was just so clear what he was up to.
So are they going to get the votes for this kind of thing?
They will be able to pass the subpoena,
which is wild.
That's right.
Now,
you think they actually execute it?
That's going to be a different story.
Yeah.
That's going to be a different story.
I have a feeling guys like you are going to make it very painful.
We're going to make it painful. We're going to have some votes. We're all working together.
Yeah.
We have some suggestions about some subpoenas that we're going to bring up.
Good.
And ask them to make them vote on. I just can't believe they've taken this step.
Yeah, I can't either.
But they have.
We're all very glad and thankful that you are where you are to.
Well, we've got a lot of firepower on the judiciary.
Yeah, you do.
You know,
it's a good committee, no question.
We got some smart guys on there.
I want to switch gears a little bit to what we started with the Israel Palestine situation and the idea that congressional Dems are still pushing to send billions to the IMF and from the IMF to Iran.
Yeah.
Knowing what we know, and we've covered this in great detail here on the program about Iran's central role in funding Hamas, funding Hezbollah, basically as proxies to their own sort of interest in the region. What the hell are they thinking?
Well, President Biden and his team decided early on that if they were just nice to Iran, that Iran would cooperate and be nicer to us. As best I can tell, President Biden and most of his people think that the way to approach these things is when you're in a bar fight. If you just stop and quote Socrates to your opponent, everything will be okay. I read Beowulf to them, and that'll calm them right down. Okay. So
just some literature.
We're in a bar fight. This is a prison yard riot.
Right.
And so what does he do? He says, look, I'm a nice guy. This is after he became president. I'm a nice guy. Trump put sanctions on you. I'm not going to enforce them. As a result of that, the Iranians have been able to earn an extra, as best I can tell, $25 to $40 billion.
Just down the oil.
From oil.
Yeah.
But then something that you gentlemen noticed, but others in the Congress didn't notice, I guess it was about a year ago, President Biden and Secretary Yellen, I cross-examined her in committee about it, gave Iran $4.5 billion cash. Cash. Now, they are, I won't get into the details, but they're called special drawing rights. They're basically dividends from the International Monetary Fund. The IMF is a World Bank, as you know, 190 countries. Every now and then they declare a dividend. They issue special drawing rights. Yellen could have stopped it, and she didn't. This is above and beyond the $6 billion that President Biden tried to give him on the prisoner swap. Now, that $6 billion, by the way, President Biden's team says, well, we've held it up. It's in a bank in Qatar.
Yeah.
Okay? Qatar is on the side of Hamas. If Qatar tells the bank to give the money to Hamas, who you think the bank in Qatar is going to listen to?
Yeah, they're not.
Janet Yellen? Are the head of the government in Qatar?
Yeah, not the best oversight.
Yeah, where if you don't agree with them, they chop your hand off, okay? You'd have a one-handed banker, okay?
One-handed banker, so you don't want to be that.
This $6 billion is still in play. Yeah. The point is that look, it's been proven time and time and time again. Weakness invites the wolves.
Yeah.
And I don't know why this is. If I make it to heaven, I'm going to ask. But there's some people out there, they're not mixed up. They're not sick. They're not confused. It's not that their mama or daddy didn't love them enough. They're just bad people. And some of them run countries. And the Ayatollah, he will kill you and drink your blood out of a boot. Okay? Right. And he understands one thing.
Yeah.
Okay? One thing, and that is strength.
No question about it.
And we've shown the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And if you think that the war in the Middle East and Ukraine and what's going on with China's aggression in the Indo-Pacific and Taiwan aren't related, then you shouldn't be driving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're all related.
It's a very, very important point.
And they have chosen to make their move at this point. How can I put this? Fair or not, many people, both in America and outside America, we all age differently. They look at our president, and they think he has deteriorated physically.
Yeah. So does half the Democrat Party, by the way.
And the Democratic Party.
According to latest polls.
I'm not saying it's fair, but it's reality. They think he's older than the Adirondack Mountains, okay? and they think he needs to retire and go home and sell catheters on late night TV or something.
Reverse mortgages, man.
Reverse mortgages.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's fair, and I don't wish President Biden any ill fate or ill will, but that's just the reality we're dealing with, and we see it, and our enemies see it.
Yeah, no, there's no question about it, and increasingly the American public sees it. According to the latest polls, things are now looking great for Joe Biden. He's trailing just about everybody that you can put on a ballot right now, and he's at an all-time low.
I think he's ahead of cholera. But it's close. It's neck and neck, depending on the day.
It depends on severity of the cholera,
yeah,
probably.
Yeah. Moderate cholera, he might beat.
I love it. So what have you brought? What you brought us?
Oh,
some
I brought
stuff?
you some gifts.
What do we have here?
Let's see. And this is some Louisiana beer.
Oh, yes.
Called
What is
Purple Haze beer.
Excellent.
This looks like it's a raspberry lager. All right.
This is a real alligator head.
Oh, hell yes. Look at this, fellas. Look at this. Now, I imagine you wrestled this guy yourself.
Oh, yeah, of course.
You take him
I mean,
right
that's
out.
phenomenal.
And this, for each of you, is a cup. And what does it say?
This is to drink our Purple Haze.
To drink your Purple Haze, and the cup says, stand your ass up for the national anthem.
Oh,
Good
yes.
So
Look at
enjoy,
this.
gentlemen.
I love this. And it's got a handsome photo on it.
Of
as
course.
well.
Who is that?
Who is that handsome gentleman? Look at that.
Oh, my God.
Good cup. Good cup.
That's awesome. Well, we can't thank you enough for coming.
That's fun, gentlemen.
Listen, anytime you just want to come on and talk smack about something,
I'll do it.
you just come
Can
on.
I come on? We'll come on and tell jokes.
Yeah,
We'll
anytime.
clean them up.
You don't have to clean them up.
No, you don't have to.
No, we have a very
We'll tell jokes about McConnell and about Schumer.
Yeah. That'd be good.
I think that sounds great.
And we can talk about your first sexual experience next time. How about that? But I'm gonna do my research.
It was dark. It was dark. It was night.
Oh, man, that's so good. Always entertaining, always
Thanks,
worth
guys.
our time. Thank you so much, Senator
Thanks,
Kennedy,
gentlemen.
for
Thanks
coming
for
in.
having me.
You
Thank
bet.
you so much.
Well, he has one of the all-time great personalities in the U.S. Senate. I'm very disappointed that I missed that interview.
Yeah, well, it was sad not to have you, but I think what you missed was made up for by him sort of questioning the origins of Michael Duncan's sexual activity right off the top.
I mean, like, couldn't ask for a better interview. And also very important to point out, this guy is a warrior in the judiciary. Like, the Democrats, I can't stress enough, are essentially trying to destroy the rule of law. They've besieged the homes of conservative justice for nearly 2 years now. Every day they're there, threatening their lives even after they tried assassinating Kavanaugh. Kennedy is trying to fight for the rule of law there on the judiciary, and thank God he's there.
Yeah.
My mom already calls me like every week about the show.
God.
Shout out to you, Mom. To complain about how you guys are too mean to me.
How we mistreat you.
Now she has another person to complain about.
She's going to write the senator from Louisiana.
Yeah, probably. File a complaint.
Oh, I love it. It's all in good fun. We appreciate it. I think we've done it here. Just a reminder, we have the Miami show this week. You can go to ruthlesspodcast.com and still apparently pick up your unbelievably affordable $10 tickets that get you to 3 events. This is going to be a blast. I can't wait to do it with you fellas, but until then, I think we've done it.
I think so. Absolute banger of an episode. Gentlemen, again, reminder to our listeners, subscribe on YouTube because it's even more fun in video. So, until next time, minions, keep the faith, hold the line, and own the libs. We'll see you on Thursday. Stay ruthless.